Mr. President, I rise in support of a treaty that I actually think is vital, of vital importance to our national security, to our national interests, and our international reputation in the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And let me first start off by recognizing Senator Kerry, the chairman of our Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Lugar as the ranking member. They've done an extraordinary job. I smile as I listen to some of my colleagues say it hasn't been reviewed enough, it hasn't been vetted enough. We have had an incredible number of sessions on the question of what the treaty contains and fleshing out all of its points and points of view. And in a very bipartisan way, the committee has worked assiduously to bring us to this point so that members can make an informed decision. So I want to salute the chairman for his incredible work in this regard. You know, the original START treaty expired on December 5th of last year, 2009. So as of today, December 16th of 2010, it has been 376 days since the United States lost the ability to conduct on-site inspections. Lost it. Not knowing what is happening with those weapons. 376 days since we lost our ability to monitor and verify Russia's nuclear arsenal. Now, I know that some say our relationship with Russia has gotten a lot better. Yes, but it is about their arsenal that we care about. It is about an arsenal that now has a Russian leadership that we are having better relationships with, but we never know what that relationship will be tomorrow. And good relationships are built on firm understandings, and the treaty creates a firm understanding of our respective obligations. That's why we need to move forward and ratify START. Now, I agree, I've heard some of my colleagues suggest that there are other nations, namely Iran and North Korea, that present presently maybe a greater threat to our security and the security of our allies, but that is not the point. The point is that the threat of loose nuclear materials anywhere in the world, whether in Russia, Iran, or North Korea, is a major concern. The point is the severity of the threat from those nations does not diminish the threat presented by the Russian nuclear arsenal. Those threats in no way negate the need to continue our non-proliferation regime and conclude a treaty with Russia, and then move on to continuing address the serious threats presented by Iran and North Korea. And let me just say on one of those two, on Iran, since my days in the House of Representatives, I have been pursuing Iran well before some people looked at Iran as a challenge. When I found out the International Atomic Energy Administration was taking voluntary contributions for the United States to help create operational capacity at the Bushehr nuclear facility, and raised those issues and sought to stem the use of U.S. taxpayer dollars going for that purpose. So I understand about Iran and North Korea, but that does not diminish the importance of knowing about this nuclear arsenal. Now, it's true that political developments in the past 2 decades have greatly diminished the probability of nuclear war between our nations, but the fact remains that Russia continues to have more than 600 nuclear launch vehicles and more than 2,700 warheads. And it is because of those numbers that this chamber needs to do what is in our national security interest and ratify START now. Now, we need the ability to track and verify Russia's nuclear arsenal. We need on-site inspections. We need the enhanced flexibility of short-notice inspections of deployed and non-deployed systems. We need to be able to verify the numbers of warheads carried on Russian strategic missiles. We need the ability, provided for the first time in this treaty, for the first time, to track all accountable strategic nuclear delivery systems, and we need a verification regime. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. We know those words well. They have been spoken on this floor many times by many of our Republican colleagues, some who are now willing to turn their backs on the truth of those words. The truth is at the heart of this treaty. The ability for this nation to verify Russia's nuclear arsenal remains paramount to our security. It remains paramount to continued bilateral cooperation between the United States and Russia. So for these reasons, START has broad bipartisan support, including support from the Secretaries of Defense and State and National Security Advisors for a whole host of presidents, Presidents Nixon, Presidents Ford, Presidents Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush. They all believe, all of those people have come together, regardless of their partisan labels or views. They all believe this is in our national security interest and necessary if we are to show the world that we demand as much of ourselves as we ask of others. So as we press the Iranian and North Korean governments to come into compliance, this treaty demonstrates to all nations who have nuclear aspirations that we are willing to live by the rules, that non-proliferation of nuclear weapons is not an empty wish, but a national policy that is in our national interest and the interest of the world. That our willingness to accede to oversight and monitoring of our nuclear weapons and facilities, our willingness to reduce our nuclear arsenal in the interest of global security, and our willingness to cooperate with willing partners is part and parcel of American policy. It is what we believe is right, what we will live by, and what we will demand of all nations. I hope that with respect to global nuclear security, that we can see clear to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Some have suggested in this chamber we can't do that. We certainly can. We can ratify START and continue to press Iran and North Korea. You know, this is the one issue that I would have hoped that we certainly do in some respects, certainly in some of our leadership on the committee, and Senator Lugar and others. But it is the one place that the Senate has always enjoyed a bipartisan effort to put the country forward first in the eyes of all those in the nation, in the world, I should say, and understand that there is no division. It was Senator Vandenberg, a Republican from Michigan, who once famously said, quote, "To me, bipartisan foreign policy means a mutual effort to unite our official voice at the water's edge." He went on to say, it does, quote, "It does not invoke the remotest surrender of free debate in determining our position. In a word, it simply seeks national security ahead of partisan advantage." Now, sadly, Mr. President, I believe the efforts by some to derail START are politically motivated, putting partisan advantage ahead of national security. Nothing that protects us from the spread of nuclear weapons should be politically motivated, not in this brave new world. Let's be clear, this treaty does not in any way diminish our commitment to keeping this nation safe and strong. It imposes no limits on current or planned ballistic missile defense programs by the United States. In fact, the President has committed to a 10-year, $80 billion plan to modernize our nuclear infrastructure, which represents a 15% increase over current spending levels. The truth is that the United States retains overwhelming strike capacity under this treaty. Under this treaty, we will retain 700 deployed launchers and 1,550 deployed warheads. Let's keep in mind the overwhelming strike capacity this represents to assure any adversary of a devastating response to any attack on the United States or allies, which is at the heart of our deterrent posture. In real terms, just to give us a sense of what this means, we will retain enough strike capacity to end civilization as we know it and destroy the entire ecosystem of the planet, far beyond the destructive power of the weapons used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's keep in mind that one standard nuclear warhead has an explosive force equal to 100,000 tons of conventional high explosives. The use of 1,000 nuclear warheads has a destructive power of 100 million tons of dynamite and the ability to darken this planet in a nightmare nuclear winter beyond our imagination. So, Mr. President, any argument to the contrary, any argument that we do not retain an overwhelming nuclear strike capacity is, in my view, a political argument. And I believe that some who have come and said that we can't do this, and then I hear in the midst of this discussion, in the midst of this treaty debate, I hear omnibus discussions. You know, I cannot believe that something that is about the national security of the United States, making sure that future generations of Americans never face that nuclear winter, somehow gets lumped in with all of the other political conversations. I know that I have heard the leadership of the other side of the aisle say that their number one goal is for this president to fail at all costs and make him a one-term president. But my God, I thought that this had nothing to do with that. I thought that this had nothing to do with that. I would hope that on an occasion like this, where we are talking about the nation's security, the ability to verify, the ability to understand what Russia's nuclear weaponry is all about, goes beyond the success or failure of this president. It's about the nation being able to succeed. And finally, I've heard a lot of talk about how late this is, and it's almost Christmas, and I certainly want to be with my family as much as anybody else, but I have to be honest with you. I want my family to be assured. I want the family of every New Jerseyan I represent, of every American that I am part of this United States Senate, to have the security that they, in fact, will never face that nuclear winter. I cannot accept that the statements that I've heard here, and I wasn't going to include this in my remarks, but I've heard this now several times, that we are here so late. Well, you know, the session, this two-year session of Congress has been so challenging because time and time again, colleagues, particularly on the other side of the aisle, have used a procedure in the Senate, a right they have, but it is a right that has clearly been abused, to filibuster. And what that means is that which we grew up understanding as Americans from the day we're in a classroom and we are taught about a simple majority rule, well, here in the Senate, that simple majority of representing the United States people, of 300 million people, is 51. But under the rules of the Senate, when one senator wants to object to moving forward, ultimately, we don't need that simple majority that Americans have come to understand. We end up needing 60. And of course, since neither party possesses those 60, we often end up in a stalemate of being able to move forward. And that has been used time and time and time and time and time again. I'd have to do it over 100 times just for the one session of Congress, of the 2 years of the Congress, to remind people why it is so late in the process. Because time and time again, that process has been used to delay. Even when that process has been broken and the 60 votes have been accomplished, there have been votes that soar in the 80 or 90 percentile of the members of this body voting to support the proposition, but the time was killed. It's the time not of the Senate, it's the time of the American people. So we are here today at a time, and then I have to hear some of my colleagues in the midst of a debate about a nuclear treaty, understanding that we are trying to prevent and to verify the possibility that weapons get out of the hands of those who have the authority of them, among other reasons to have this treaty, and talk about omnibus. Well, I just find it beyond my imagination, especially when everything that my colleagues who are railing about on that are part of asking for hundreds of millions of dollars in earmarks in the omnibus, and then come and say, oh, this is a terrible thing, and the treaty's being brought up at the same time, and somehow we shouldn't be able to move this treaty because of that issue, even though what they rail against is what they have blatantly participated against. This issue is too important to be wound up in that. So, Madam President, in the end, the purpose of this treaty and of U.S. efforts to thwart other nations from going nuclear is to ensure that future generations will not live with the specter of nuclear winter and the destruction of civilization as we know it. We have an opportunity to move, and I would hope move quickly, to do what is right, to ratify START, and lead the world by example. And by leading the world by example, then you can also make the demands on the rest of the world to make sure that they obey and agree and ultimately concur and ultimately live by the same example. That's our opportunity, and that's an opportunity we should not lose. With that, Madam President, I yield the floor.